Welcome to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, the show that explores the background of Tolkien's amazing world from the very beginning. I've always found it interesting how patient Dark Lords are. You don't consider patience to be something that many evil characters have. It's not a quality you see in other stories very often. Generally, evil characters tend to be a little bit anxious. They're ready to get out there. They want to prove themselves. They want to conquer or take over things, or just show how much better they are than everyone else. Morgoth and Sauron, like him, bide their time. They're very good at just working in the background, setting up their plans, making sure everything is in place and that they have the strength and the power and everything in place to overwhelm their enemies before pulling the trigger. If you think about the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Sauron isn't ready yet to go to war, but he's put in a place where he thinks that his enemies have the ring and are about to use it, and so it presses him into battle earlier than he would have liked. And even then, his forces are extremely formidable, and had certain things not played out the way they did, he would have taken Minas Tirith. And this most likely would have spelled the end for the good guys in the story. Well, for all of Morgoth's patience, things at this point in the story of the Tales of Beleriand, of the First Age, don't always go to plan for him. There's a mistake. Mistakes were made. Morgoth, I don't think, was directly responsible for this mistake so much as indirectly responsible. In the background, while the elves were settling the land and places like Gondolin and Nargothrond were being founded, he was working on a special weapon. The Uruk-loki, a fire drake. Or we could just call them dragons. And I'm going to spend the second half of this episode talking about the origin of the dragons and what Tolkien scholars think might be the actual origin, because it is not spelled out here in the Silmarillion, at least not directly. We do know a few things from this story, but there are a lot of things that we need to speculate about in order to get to the core of who the dragons are and how he made them. But we'll get to that in the second half of this episode. The first half of this episode is all about Glaurung. Such a good name, Glaurung. The first of the fire drakes, the father of the dragons. And Tolkien uses that term, father of the dragons, which does lead a little bit to some of the confusion about what exactly that means. Well, Glaurung, not being full grown yet, but a good 100 years old at this point, was ready. He decided it was time to test his mettle against the elves. Or maybe claws and fire and toxic gas was probably a better thing that to describe that he'd be testing. But he decides it is time to go. He needs to do what he is built to do. And he attempts to break the siege of Angband. And Morgoth hadn't planned for this. He wasn't ready for it. But Glaurung thought he was ready. When we think of Glaurung, we need to remember that he was a prototype. He was the earliest of the dragons. There are words that are used in Tolkien's writings that have been used since then to describe dragons in fantasy. Worm, drake, dragon. The picture of Glaurung is one of a serpent without any wings. This doesn't fit the modern conception of what a fantasy dragon looks like. We get all these arguments about, does a dragon have 4 legs, or is it a drake because it has 2 legs, and or a wyvern. Wyverns have 2 legs and wings, but no front arms, that kind of thing. This wasn't something Tolkien was worried about here. He specifically explains that Glaurung is like a worm, a lizard, a worm with a Y, W-Y-R-M, a creature, a gigantic, fantastically sized, large lizard-like creature. And when you look at Tolkien's actual drawings of dragons, you can see that there's a lot more in common with the way he draws dragons with Eastern culture dragons. When you think of places like China and the dragons that they draw, they look very serpentine, very long bodies, also with wings and legs, but the bodies tend to be very elongated. Those, I think, are more of the designs visually that Tolkien had in mind when he was thinking about Glaurung. Glaurung slithered on the ground. Glaurung has this large but long body, and again, no wings, an underbelly that lays close to the ground. And the first time that we meet Glaurung, like I mentioned in the beginning of the show, he's ready for battle. He heads out before it is time in order to try to break the siege and take on as many elves as he possibly can. It seems like he's very headstrong. He's very sure of himself. And dragons also, it needs to be noted here. And many of you have met Smaug before, if you've read The Hobbit. Smaug is smart. He's intelligent. Glaurung as well. A very smart, intelligent kind of creature. But he didn't realize that he wasn't ready yet. He throws himself out into an area that is called Ardgalen, or Ardgalen, probably. This area of the map is the zone between Angband and the rest of the new elven settlements south of Angband, Thangorodrim, the fortress, like the area that was being sieged, basically. Ardgalen means green region. It is an area that is basically flatlands between the mountains in the north and the forests and other mountains and things that are south of that. This region was so green and prosperous with grasses and plants and those kinds of things that it was named the Green Region. Later on in the story, it doesn't stay that way. Eventually, it gets the name Anfaglith, which means land of grasping dust. So you can imagine some of the events to come here. Now, unlike some of the other conflicts that we hear about in the Silmarillion and in these stories, we don't get a very clear, detailed example of what happens when Glaurung decides to take on the elves. We do know that initially they fled before him. They saw this gigantic lizard creature coming out of Angband, breathing fire and leaving toxic gases in his wake. This thing was a chemical, like a biochemical weapon of its age. You could think of it like that. And the elves fled back to Ered Wethrin and Dorthonion, and they were very concerned about this creature and if they would be able to handle it. But like with many of these events, you have one of the key characters stepping up and taking on the responsibilities of fighting back the darkness. Fingon, who we've talked about before, Prince Fingon of Hithlum. Hithlum's, again, to the west, kind of southwest of Angband, decides that he's going to take on this creature and rides in battle against the creature. And it says rides here, so you can picture in your head elves on horseback with archers, horse archers, which seems like a really smart idea against something that is very large and probably quick and blowing fire. You want to stay at a distance and you want to stay mobile. And the words here in the text are, they hemmed him round with a ring of swift riders. and Glaurung could not endure their darts, being not yet come to his full armory, and he fled back to Angband. So the picture that you need to have in mind here is that, one, they outmaneuver him, they surround him with horse archers, and they hit him with elven bows and arrows, and Glaurung isn't full-sized yet. And he hasn't come to his full armory, and that's the quote. It's as if the scales on his back have not hardened enough yet. We know of Smaug that his scales were like steel, and they could not be pierced with regular arrows or blades. Glaurung would eventually get to that size and scale and strength and armory level, I guess you could say. He hasn't fully leveled up yet, but not yet. And the sting of these arrows was too much for him. And eventually he decided that he needed to back off, and he retreated back to Angband to lick his wounds. And Morgoth was not happy about this. This was supposed to be a surprise. Glaurung was the weapon of all weapons. It was something that Morgoth had spent hundreds of years developing. And we'll talk about the development and what that might actually mean in the second half of the show. But this was supposed to be the atomic bomb in his arsenal. It was supposed to be the thing that his enemies, did not realize that he had. So that when he decided it was time to go to war again, he could push in, probably with his regular forces, maybe throw in some Balrogs along with the orcs, things that the elves had seen before and might be kind of prepared, and then hit them with Glaurung when they're not expecting it. They think they can stand against these forces that they've seen before, and then all of a sudden you hit them with the atomic weapon. But that did not happen. And Glaurung will not be seen again for 200 years. And we know the elves, eternal, Morgoth, eternal. He's got time to wait. Glaurung obviously needed his time to lick his wounds and continue growing, because the final version, this isn't even my final form yet, the final version that we get of Glaurung 200 years later is extremely formidable and wreaks a lot of havoc. So stay tuned for that part of the story. This is also interesting because Glaurung ties into the story of Turin Turimbar, who there is a book about, The Children of Húrin. The book, The Children of Húrin, came out, 15 years ago-ish? And this is one of the stories that exists in the Silmarillion, but then years later, Christopher Tolkien took more details from other texts and was able to create a novel out of. Turin is one of the well-known heroes, tragic heroes, almost like a dark hero of the peoples of Middle-earth. And so be ready, Turin and Glaurung get to meet in about 200 years. So Glaurung's story is not finished. In fact, he's going to do a lot more. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable, and I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. quince.com/ringslore. All right, welcome to the middle of the show. I can't wait to get to the second half and to explain more about the origins of Glaurung and dragons in general. I think this is a really exciting episode. Thank you so much to our patrons. We have 2 new patrons this week, Isaac W. and Todd S. Thank you for signing up on the Patreon. That means that we are up to 27 patrons right now. Thank you so much to every single one of you. Also, huge shout out to our VIP patrons, Esoteric Rage, Larry, Tristan P, and Tyler B. Thank you so very much to all of you. You guys, I couldn't do this as a primary thing for a living without the support from you guys and the community. I really appreciate it. I can't believe we're up to 27 patrons. Also, I've been watching some of the teaser trailers for the Rings Amazon thing coming out. Words are falling out of my brain right now, but I'm just so excited. All of this stuff. If you guys have not checked out the most recent trailer and the, revelation that the Meteor Man is probably Sauron, go check it out. Go check it out. Especially look at the pictures of the orcs and just the cinematography. The more they show of the series, the more beautiful it looks. I'm very excited for that coming very soon. So just needed to throw that in there in the middle here because I need to geek out about this stuff with you guys. Also, we have some reviews to read out this week. We've got 4 new ones. I'll try to get through these quickly. First, we have Imrahill 2021 from the United States, who writes on Apple Podcasts, absolutely incredible, 5 stars. I've always been interested in Lord of the Rings, and I'm always interested in learning new things about Tolkien's immense world, but I've had a hard time finding a podcast or channel that can keep my interest. When my friend recommended this to me, I was skeptical, but once I started listening, I have absolutely loved what I've heard. Thanks for putting time in to make such a quality podcast. 5 stars easily. Well, thank you, Imrahill. I appreciate that. That's awesome. And tell your friend thanks as well. Also, we have one from DJD564 in Great Britain. I don't know why I stumbled over the word Britain. Who, this one's quick and easy. Superb, 5 stars. I just started going through the episodes a few days ago and I'm already on episode 10. Keep it up. Will do, DJ. Oh, and I miscounted these. We actually have 3. One of them got kind of like reposted or something. Then we have one. Okay, so this one's interesting. This one's a 4-star. I'm going to read it because I want to address one of the things that they noted in the review. So, and thank you, S. Rosen, for this. 419. This is in the US as well. Exactly what I was looking for. 4 stars. I love that this podcast takes the lore, which can be difficult for me to absorb, and puts it into words that click. I'm also very interested in the meta-analysis and historical religious comparison that puts Lord of the Rings into context, but I unfortunately cannot afford the monthly patron level, the pattern, but patron, I know what you're saying, that unlocks the bonus episodes. If it were dropped in price, I would consider supporting for the extra content. Love the show, though. So thank you, and I appreciate that. I'm sorry that took off a star. If I could make it up to you, I would. But I do want to address the cost level of tier 2, which unlocks the bonus episodes, and why I've priced it the way I have, because I think some people are probably curious about that. It is currently set for $14.99, so $15, and it requires me to do what is effectively an entire second episode, almost. Usually the length of those is a little bit shorter, but it's basically a second episode, extra research every week. And on top of that, because when you sign up for Patreon, you get access to the entire backlog of everything else I've done, you end up getting a lot of content. So the idea here is that if you are interested in those bonus episodes, if you were to sign up now when we're like 20 episodes in, you're actually getting access to the 20 pre-existing bonus episodes and a new episode every week. So it requires me not only to keep creating more content, but if somebody signs up later, they could just download and this is a secret. If you guys are interested in doing this, you can. If you sign up now, you can go download all the bonus episodes and then cancel your subscription after a month. And so the amount that you get for that $15 increases in value as time goes on. If I had set that at $5 or $10, then that would be even cheaper and even easier way for people to get access to those episodes that I put a lot of work into, and then over time will have put a ton of work into. So imagine after a year of doing this, there's 50 episodes available, 50 times the average length of an episode. That's a ton of content for $15. So you're welcome to do this. You can use this little hack if you'd like. Of course, I would appreciate it if you stayed a patron in order to help support my efforts in continuing to make these. But that's still better than not having been supported at all in my eyes. And ultimately, I'm putting that content out there so that you guys can enjoy it and learn from it and all of that as well. So if you want to look at it like that, you are actually getting way more than just one extra bonus episode a week. You're getting an entire backlog of episodes, without ads, all of that stuff that you can listen to for just $15. So if you were to purchase a movie, you'd spend more than $15 for way less content, if you think of it that way, or an audiobook. So anyway, just wanted to put that in context for those of you who are kind of on the fence with the pricing and how that actually shakes out. So thanks again for everybody, for all of your support, all of you who take time to leave ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. You can leave some ratings on Spotify as well. Thank you to everyone. I really do appreciate the support, and thank you for helping let me make this and make this a full-time job. All right, let's get on with the rest of the stuff about dragons. All right, welcome back. Sorry to take a little bit longer on the mid-break on this one, but I just wanted to clear up some stuff, and now we get to talk about dragons. Now, the dragon, the question of the origin of the dragon, like where did the dragon come from? How did Morgoth make it? All of that stuff has been highly debated for a long time among fans and scholars of Tolkien's work. Dragons are intelligent creatures. We know this. They speak common. They can probably speak multiple languages. They live a very long time. They're extremely cunning. They're very smart. They're very large. They're very strong. What did Morgoth use to create these? We know that Morgoth can't create from nothing. In fact, nobody can, except for Iluvatar, or, God in Tolkien's eyes. The dragons had to have been a creation that came from the mutation, manipulation, corruption of something else that was great and powerful in its own way. You look at the way the orcs work, and if the orcs are corrupted humans or elves or other theories have basically any other creature out there that was an intelligent, humanish kind of race, then for what Morgoth does to them, they appear to get weaker. I mean, they're formidable foes in groups, but individually, I would take an elf over an orc any day to fight on my side. Not just because of the personalities, but because of what they're capable of. They are corrupted, and they seem lesser than the thing that was corrupted in order to make them. So if you take the idea that Glaurung is a lizard-like being, then there must have been other lizard-like beings that he came from, right? But where were they? What were they? What are the progenitors of dragons? We don't really know. We don't see them in the wild. We don't hear tale of giant lizard creatures living in the world. Also, and let's get a little bit more into the detail here about the nature of dragons. Dragons aren't just big lizards that can breathe fire and have scales that can repel blades and arrows and those kinds of things. They are extremely smart. We know that they hatch from eggs. We know that they take a long time to mature. We know that they have other features in their arsenal, you could say, for when they are taking on their enemies. At times they can be hypnotic. They can fool people with their words. They can curse a place and give it the dragon sickness, this sense of overwhelming greed that comes from their very personality, because they themselves are greedy. They like gold, they like treasure, they hoard it. All of these features are part of who the dragons are. These are intelligent kinds of features. They can also leave toxic gas, which I did mention at the beginning of the episode, but aside from the biological side of the dragons, they have personality, and they are very intentional in what they do. They're smart. And if you, again, look at the orcs are less intelligent than the creatures they came from. You don't consider the orcs to be the smart people in Morgoth's or Sauron's army. Like, there's a reason why orcs aren't taking the place of Sauron as some sort of lieutenant. Sauron is a Maiar. Sauron is smart by nature, is intelligent. Even you could say the Balrogs, being from Maiar stock, have a level of intelligence. Now, we never sit down and have a conversation with any of them, but I would imagine that they're fairly intelligent creatures. So what is exactly going on here? Well, we have 3 lines of main speculation as to the origins of the dragon. One is, and as you can probably tell from what I've explained so far, the one that I'm least likely to think is actually accurate, is that they were originally physical beasts, some sort of other creature, something like a fell beast or some other large lizard-like creature, and they were basically corrupted, like elves to orcs. And if that's the case, then maybe, I mean, we've got a little bit there. So, for example, like a warg seems to be some sort of corrupted, like larger wolf type character or creature, and wargs can speak. Okay, so maybe there's some sort of line of original creatures that are animal-like, but yet intelligent. So, for example, the eagles. We have an example of a creature that is intelligent and animal-like. Eagles. Maybe there are intelligent wolves out there somewhere, intelligent lizards out there somewhere, but we don't actually see them. And from what we know, things like the fell beasts don't talk. They act like animals, and they're ridden on like steeds. So that one doesn't really hold up a whole lot. Okay, so what if we go down the Maiar path, right? We've got Maiar, we've got Valar and Maiar, right? Maiar are the lesser of the two, and individuals like Sauron is a Maiar. Sauron can take physical form. Gandalf, also a Maiar, originally given a physical form. In fact, all of the wizards come from that. They are highly intelligent. They are capable of doing things that you would consider to be magical. Okay, this seems like in line with some of the requirements for a dragon, right? Now, the idea would be that the Maiar, some of the Maiar that are following Morgoth are now given bodies designed by Morgoth to be formidable weapons. They are embodied in these dragon-type shapes. So, if that's the case, then all of them should exist from the beginning of time. But we do have some counterpoint here, because we know that Smaug, the dragon that we are most familiar with, was born after the end of the First Age. He's actually a fairly young dragon compared to many of these other dragons that come about in the First Age. So if that's the case, they can't all just be Maiar that are embodied, because reasons, that couldn't have happened with Smaug. Smaug actually had to come from an egg and was born biologically through the procreation of other dragons. Can Maiar procreate with other people? It seems like they can. So that leads to the third possibility, in that maybe these are embodied Maiar who procreate with beasts, some sort of lizard creature, in order to create something else. So think of Ungoliant procreating with spiders in order to have spider babies. And those spider babies are like Shelob. Shelob is still intelligent. Shelob is still formidable. But Shelob is much more grounded into reality and an existing body than Ungoliant, who seems to have to take on that form, but could lose it at any moment and kind of go back into some other plane of existence, maybe even out into the outer dark, or just disappear. I don't know. There's this, I don't know if that's super accurate, but there's this like not as physically limited sense to when the Maiar take on physical bodies, if that makes sense. For example, Sauron being able to change forms. Sauron takes on actually different forms in different parts of the stories, not just this idea of the eye or a like human type shape. So if that's where they actually come from, if we have a combination of embodied Maiar mating with beasts, some sort of large reptilian-like creature, in order to create a line of physical, biological dragons that can then give birth to other dragons, now we have a self-sustaining creature, something that can exist on its own and procreate from that point on. Therefore, we get something like a Smaug. So in my mind, that's the most possible of the explanations. But unfortunately, we never get actual confirmation about this because we don't have any works from Tolkien that explaining this process. And we don't have an interview where he answered the question about the origin of dragons. The other thing we do know is that these dragons are very, very influenced by Germanic literature. Although I noted that they were more of an Eastern physical design and shape in Tolkien's own drawings. And if you don't know, the maps in the books and many of the drawings that you see in some locations are Tolkien's himself. He would draw things out in order to get a better visual sense of what he was creating. So these have commonality. So ancient poems and sagas from the middle of Europe, stories like the Norse, I'm going to leave that in there. The Norse sagas or Beowulf has dragons. And the similarities with those are mostly things like they embody greed, they hoard treasure, they are jealous, they tend to be large, they tend to breathe fire. And then you have that with the combination of the Volsunga saga, Fafnir, who is a dragon that poisons the land around him. This idea that toxicity, like gas and poisons, kind of leak out of the creature. And the idea that there are scales on the outside, but the underbelly is soft and vulnerable is another feature that comes from the Volsunga. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, saga. So there are some similarities there. You'll probably notice that most of the dragons, although they have these like vulnerable underbellies, Smaug didn't, which is also notable. He had scales all the way around and there was only that one gap in his scales. So that is a little bit different and notably a Tolkien expansion on the design of the dragons, which is pretty cool. So I would love to hear what you guys think. Do you think the Maiar are a source for this creation? Do you think that they were somehow just embedded with Morgoth's own magics in order to rise a creature up out from something it already was into something more intelligent and more formidable? I don't know. I think I'm going to go with the whole Maiar mating with things kind of perspective. At least that's where I am now. But let me know what you think. Send me a note. You can always reach me on Twitter at robots_radio. Join us on the Robots Radio Discord, or, just yell things out the car door while driving, and maybe I'll hear them. I don't think that one's likely, but thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one. Thanks for listening to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. If you'd like to learn more about other fantasy worlds, check out my other podcasts, The Elder Scrolls Lorecast, The Witcher Lorecast, and more at robotsradio.net. If you'd like to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note on Twitter at robots_radio, or join our amazing community on the Robots Radio Discord. There are links in the show notes, or just search Robots Radio Discord, or find the link on robotsradio.net. I'll see you next time. Robots Radio. Games, lore, stories, community. Just press play.